everybody. Welcome to Leadership Alive. This is our first session in 2021. And Happy New Year, Aarron.
Hey, Happy New
It's
Year to you.
a new way in which we're doing this. We've decided to do this using the webinar function and not the Zoom meeting function, so it'll be a little different. Everybody out there, our goal, so if people out there know this, our goal for doing this webinar function is that we're able to record this. And then if you're not able to attend the Leadership Alives, we're going to have access to them on YouTube through our website. So you'll be able to view them afterwards or share them with other people. And during this session, if you would like to ask us a question, and we'll look at it later in the webinar, please use the Q&A function, and we'll keep an eye on that. And we'll give this a try and see how it works. So Aarron, what we decided to talk about today is the new year and our leadership commitments for the new year. The new year always is kind of this arbitrary demarcation point where we can choose to make resolutions and all of that. I'm not so much up on that, but I do think it's an important time in our organization, yes, to make some commitments. Talk a little bit about what a commitment is.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm so glad to hear you say we're going to focus on our leadership commitments. I can remove off of my list the lose weight, which I won't do, work out more, which I won't obviously do, get more sleep, which I'm not going to do. So really happy that I can remove all of those. But the interesting thing I think about commitments is commitments might be a promise to ourselves. And certainly commitments can be promise to others, maybe an investment we're going to make. But I often like to use the word promise. And especially when it comes to leadership commitments, I think of them as promises to myself because only I can enforce them. I can be the one who says, yep, I didn't follow through. I did follow through. I'm going to work on it today. I'm not going to work on it today. Like those 4 truths we think about with leadership, that it requires a commitment. It requires me to make an effort to do it. It requires a sacrifice. It requires practice. It rejects kind of victimhood. So when I make these commitments that I have for this year, only I really can be the one to enforce them. Only I will know if I'm truly meeting them or not. What's commitment to you?
Yeah, so I love what you said. I like that this idea of being a promise to self. And what I like about commitment, it's more than, I hope I'm going to do more of this, or I'm going to try. Commitment is more than trying. Commitment is actually putting your heart and soul and your effort and your energy and your time and resources into it. So let's what I asked you to do was to suggest 3 commitments, and I'm going to suggest 3 commitments, but let's go back and forth and suggest some commitments. We're not saying you, to our listeners, we're not saying that you pick up all these commitments, but maybe we'll stimulate a thought to you about your leadership journey through these commitments in which you might say, yes, I want to commit to that. Or maybe we'll inspire you to find your own, and we would encourage that. But we're going to suggest 6 here today. So what's your first one, Aarron? What commitment are you suggesting?
My very first one is no more leader workarounds. So sometimes we call this CEO workarounds or executive workarounds. So there's certainly times in my career, more times than I care to admit, where the problem is staring me in the face. I know what needs to be done. I know what needs to be done will be hard, will require a sacrifice, a crucial conversation. And instead of doing it consciously or subconsciously, I come up with a workaround. Instead, I'll do this. I'll move this here. I'll pick this up myself. And sure enough, I find myself years later with the same problem, if not worse, because now it's compounded with the layers of workarounds that I've created. It's almost, might I make the comparison to when we tell a lie? And I don't mean a CEO or a leader workaround is a lie, but think of the small child who tells the lie. And then to support the lie, they have to tell another. And then to support that version, they have to tell another and another and another. And it finally becomes so big that the only way to get out of the lie is, of course, to tell the original truth. I think the only way, if I'm going to honor no more leader workarounds, is I just have to fix it the first time. So that's my first commitment to myself, is no more leader workarounds.
I really like that. I just have to ask you a question, though.
Sure.
It seems when our work with organizations that often the workarounds are that people don't want to deal with a certain problem employee or a certain behavior or activity in their leadership team. Then they just do this big workaround. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, very much so. And I think certainly consistent for myself is there might be the fear that if I take it on, there'll be a consequence. I'll lose a relationship. I'll jeopardize the team. I'll jeopardize a part of the organization. And so I think, yeah, once again, I would go back to this piece that we talked most recently about, which is fear, and how leaders need to have a healthier understanding of how to lead fear personally and professionally and within an organization.
Great. So the first one is suggested commitment is no more workarounds. So here's my first one, Aarron.
Great.
My first one is get clear about your personal mission. So here's what I mean by that. I have been, so one of the things I did for the New Year's was pull off and dust off my 7 Habits, my Covey book, and reread it. But let me tell you what stuck out for me. What stuck out for me, that everything that Covey talked about is predicated on a sense of getting a clear sense of where you're going. If you don't know personally where you're going in your leadership journey, how can you get there? So my suggestion is commit to go back and asking yourself, where am I headed in my life and in my leadership work? What's that all about? What matters to me? What is stuff that's really, really important to me? And then take some time to reflect on it. And if you want to kick it off, here's what I suggest. All of you probably have Covey's 7 Habits on your shelf somewhere. Dust it off. Don't plunge into the whole book. Just plunge into this section that he begins to talk about the first habit. The first habit that he talks about that we need if we want to be successful in life is to be proactive. And that proactivity emerges from really paying attention to what he says is the second part of that, which is begin with the end in mind. And so my suggestion is get clear about your personal mission and where you're headed.
So a question for you, John. I bet you our listeners are all thinking what I'm thinking, which is, it seems to us like John's probably, of all of the people we know, someone who probably is really clear about where he's going. So how does this lack of clarity show up? How would I know it in myself? And if I did, I hear you saying how I might begin to understand it. A question that came in from one of the people listening in was, how do I as a leader get clear about that? So I heard you talk a little bit about that, but how did you find yourself feeling like it was unclear?
Yeah, so you know it's unclear when you find yourself with competing competing requests, opportunities in your life. right? So often we ask ourselves during the day, here's a bunch of stuff that I can do. What's the most important? Because I can't do it all. So I'm going to have to say yes to some stuff, and I'm going to have to say no to some stuff. In our personal lives, saying we may say yes to work, and that's one of our challenges as leaders, is often that work captures a large segment of our life. And if we're going to say yes to more work, we're saying no to something else in our lives. In finding out if you find yourself struggling with that, or even better, if the people who love and care about you are asking you questions that challenge some of the decisions that you're making, that is an invitation to go back and look at where you're headed in your life and getting clear about your personal mission. And so that, to me, that's when it really shows up, is when you have these competing priorities and you're wondering, what should I do? Should I say yes to this committee? Should I join that association and spend some more time? Should I take on this extra work? Or what will guide me in making those decisions?
Wow.
Okay. All
Big.
right. So we have no more workarounds. We have, second one is get clear about your personal mission. What's your third one?
Yeah, my third one, or our third in
Our
this
third.
grouping. Yeah, this third in this grouping would be, I want conversations to be how I lead in 2021 and hopefully beyond. Here's what I mean by that. One of the things that I think would make me a better leader, make my organization a better organization, make my practice of leadership stronger, is to have more time to just do those first three things in our essential conversations. So that connecting, that encouraging, and that storytelling. And I often find myself with real or made up reasons to not go do that, to not drop what's in front of me on the computer screen and walk out of my office to where a crew is hanging out and just, hey, what's up? What's going on? What's working well? What are you liking? What are you disliking right now? To not jump in my vehicle and just drive around to all of the bases and pop in. And you know what? The first times I do that, it'll be really odd and uncomfortable and awkward, because what's he doing here? And where'd this come from? And all of that. But I want to make leading through conversations, real conversations, right? Conversations being this willingness to hear something new or different, to use these things along with this thing, both my heart, my analytic, along with my brain and my heart, to both hear things. So that's my second, or in this grouping, the third.
So help me understand why, even for you, and why it might be so for our listeners, that conversations get second shrift, that they get ignored, or what makes it hard to engage in conversations. Why is this a commitment? Why isn't it just natural?
Well, I think there's two components. Certainly, there's two components for me, and likely for others. The first would simply be the tyranny of the urgent often takes over. So, in Simon Sinek's terminology, there is more what and how to be done in any particular day than the day allows. To carve out large chunks of it to just sit and have conversations means something has to suffer. It goes back to your thinking of mission. And so to make this work, I will certainly need to look at my responsibilities and my role and my deliverables in any given day, and ask myself which ones I can do and can't do. Maybe I can't be on every committee who asks me to participate. Maybe I can't be on every email chain that I'm part of. So I think that's one. And I think the second part is going out and having conversations. We may hear things that we didn't want to hear. So
Ah,
imagine going out there, and of course, what do I want to hear? It's awesome, boss, chief. Things are incredible. Best place I've ever worked at. Oh my goodness, you haven't gotten the Presidential Medal of Freedom award yet? Oh, you should have had 6 by now. Versus, kind of sucks. Yeah, we could think it's kind of crappy. Yeah, you hold your paramedic, but when's the last time you ever worked? And do you even know what the ventilators are? Can you even turn them on? Here, show us how you turn them on. Or the list goes on. So having that willingness, that openness to hear the real truth, and then to be able to, the third part, I believe, is then to have the courage to take the action that's necessary. Back to the no more leader workarounds.
yeah, conversations. I'm so happy that you mentioned this. I mean, if everybody in the United States could commit themselves to having real conversations the way you described it, where we're listening with the possibility that we might change our mind or learn something new, if we could simply listen to others, it is a game changer. And I've been thinking a lot about the 75-25 rule, 75% listening and at the most 25% talking. And I'm excited about it. I just wanted to share with you, and maybe you have something going on. And for me, uh, who travels a lot in the non-COVID era, and having not traveled for the last 10 months, um, it has created space and time with this wonderful woman that I love and live with. And while we've been together for decades, I thought I knew her. I thought I knew everything about her, but we've been having more time to have conversations. And what is happening is there is a new depth, a new dimension to our relationship as we've been having the times each morning around our coffee to have conversation, to talk about who we are, to explore different topics. And I just have to say that we often think that we know our employees, we know what their journeys are, but it is only through conversation that we will genuinely know them and know them at a depth in which they will want to follow us and we will want to make their lives great.
Yeah, imagine bringing that same depth to the relationship with the organization and the people in it. Doesn't mean that somehow miraculously going out and having conversations, everybody's going to like you and everybody's going to like everything you did. If that's your goal in conversations, you're not having conversations. You're doing something completely different. I do believe it would deepen and strengthen trust and respect. So in all of the parties that are part of the conversation, because what I've really learned during COVID, and like you, not having traveled as much and having a lot more time to reflect and think, especially about how COVID has affected organizations and organizational cultures, is that even though we're around each other much more, I don't see us talking to each other much more. We almost use COVID as a
Mhm.
reason not to. We have to have all this distancing. And now, because of that, we have lots of narratives being created. And the narrative is often negative. And so we quickly go to that part of the triune brain that says, if I assume the negative, it will somehow keep me alive and safe. And I think we can mitigate that by having that relationship. That paramedic and nurse that never got along, or paramedics and nurses who never get along, all of a sudden start getting along when they started doing their ACLS class together. And all of a sudden it's not Aarron and Julie, or it's nurse and medic, it's Aarron and Julie, because now we
Yeah.
built a relationship. And so I'm just excited about the opportunity it presents, because it will require me to reorder my day and reorder my priorities to make commitment to conversations and having
Yeah.
the time to have them, because they're not fast, they take time.
They take time. But they are the primary tool in your leadership toolbox.
Mhm.
If you work conversations, that is how you build the relationships that then can get stuff done and get to the results.
Right.
Okay, so far we have no more workarounds. Commit to not having any more workarounds. We have commit to getting clear and revisiting your personal mission, and we have a commitment to investing in more conversations. I'm going to suggest a fourth commitment,
Great.
and this connects to things that we've already been talking about. But my uh, uh, suggestion is to commit to making the hard decision this year.
Mm.
So when I say that, all of us know that there are things that we need to decide, both in our own leadership journey and for our organizations, and we need to make that. And someone asked in the chat box in the Q&A, how do we know? How can we be more sure about the decision that we're making as a leader? And I'll get to that in a minute. But the first thing I want to say about this commitment is that indecision is a decision.
Mm.
So I spent this morning working with someone who has a manager that it oversees part of their operation that they need to move, and the manager is not being successful, and yet the manager's trying. The manager is putting effort in, putting energy, but for some reason, maybe it's the task is larger than the capabilities and the competencies of the manager. They're not being successful. So the operations chief is struggling to make this hard decision.
Mm.
And the problem is, and why I want to share that story is that the longer he delays in making this decision, the deeper and more complex the problem gets for his organization, and the more difficult it becomes for him to make the decision. So it's so important when there's a hard decision to make, to ask yourself, why am I resisting this? Is it because I don't want the discomfort? Is it because I want to do the workaround, as
Mm.
we talked about earlier? Why am I not making this decision? So don't just go. I'm not saying commit to go out there and just explode everything and make the decision. But when you know there's a decision that needs to be made and you're resisting, it may be a decision to finish your bachelor's degree.
Mm.
It may be a decision to go and get your master's degree. It may be a decision to leave this job or to seek something else. Those are all huge decisions. But my encouragement this year is to make the hard decision. So the first part about that will be asking yourself, what is that hard decision? What is that decision in my life that is out there? So I'm suggesting make the hard decision.
So you talked a little bit about ways to make the hard decision, but how do you know when you're not making one? I
Mm.
mean, I could be telling myself, I need more information. I'm a sensor in the Myers and Briggs. I might be telling myself, if I'm a strong P in the Myers and Briggs, that I need to just see what comes about. How do I know that there's a hard decision that I need to make that I'm avoiding? Because I could analyze it so many different ways. I could have so many different reasons for not doing it that all seem very logical in my mind. What might be the defining feeling, emotion thing that says, hey, Aarron, hard decision that you're ignoring?
That's a wonderful question. I've started to use this, and you've heard me use it, but it's a little tool that I think we all can use both in our personal lives and in our organization. And it's to ask ourselves, and it's purely subjective, but it's to ask ourselves the question, do things feel like they're moving forward, or they're stalled, or they're sliding backwards? So as it relates to your personal life, does it feel like things are moving forward? Are they stalled? Are they moving back? And as it relates to your division, or it relates to your part of the company, or to your whole organization, does it feel like it's moving forward, it's stalled, or moving back? Because when it's stalled or moving back, usually there's a difficult or challenging decision that's out there that's not being made. And so I would encourage you to look for those signs and clues. Or if the forward progress is seeming really impeded, or it's seeming really difficult, or it feels like you're pushing the rock up the hill, that is often a clue that you're not making a decision. The other area around that, and it's wound up with that, is avoidance.
Mhm.
When I'm really avoiding something and people keep pointing it out, when I know I'm avoiding it, um, then, like as an industry, EMS continues to avoid the fact that we are trying to we're trying to run high quality, top notch clinical care, high performance systems on minimal and substandard reimbursement. And as an industry, we're afraid to really turn on the spotlight and say, we will never be as good as we can and solve our workforce issues and create a workforce value proposition, because we won't make the decision to collaborate together and really address the whole revenue and reimbursement and funding part of our EMS organizations.
Mm. And I wonder if you might agree to a third way that you might know there's a decision that hard decision you need to make that you're not making is a little more subjective, which is you'll know it when you feel it. There's that famous saying from the Supreme Court, we'll know it when we see it. But I think when we have a decision that we're avoiding, we feel it. We feel anxiety, we feel angst, we are nervous, feel trepidation, we feel all of these different things that I think are our body's reaction, our subconscious's reaction to say, I'm avoiding something. And at least to bring it from back here to in front of us to say, I'm avoiding making the decision about getting the degree. I'm avoiding making the decision about leaving this organization. I'm avoiding making the decision about that manager, that supervisor, that captain, lieutenant, at least putting it in front of ourselves, because we're feeling something. We're having an emotional response often to a conscious or subconscious item.
I love that. I mean, that's that subjective feeling inside is we would call that guts, right? We would call that really the intuition, and it is built into our psychological makeup. These intuitions are really powerful, and they need to be. You've often heard people say, you know, he looks good on paper, but there's just something in my gut that says maybe we shouldn't hire him. And often when you play that out, then if you hire them, you later on you realize, right? So it's really, really important to pay attention. So one of the things I want to say about making good decisions, that you get good at making decisions and get good at making the right decisions by making decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things to do is even as you approach a day and say, one of the key things about great leaders is they make decisions. Nothing's worse in crisis and when things are going on when leaders won't make decisions, or they're making waffling decisions, or they're making decisions based on political optics. But great leaders say, let's a decision has to be made. I'm going to make a decision. And what you have to say to yourself as a leader, some of those decisions will be wrong. Just no question about it. Some of them are going to be wrong, but you grow in your decision making ability by making decisions. So ask yourself today, or let's start tomorrow, because for many of you, this is toward the end of the day, but start tomorrow. And just a way to say that is, what are the two most important decisions I'll make today? And then step forward, be bold, make the decisions. And maybe that big decision that we talked about, the difficult decision, you want to put aside. But start making decisions. It is the making of decisions that builds our confidence. Because remember, to make difficult decisions boldly and make good decisions demands both practice and internal confidence.
I think there's also a powerful emotional benefit to making a difficult decision. Certainly my experience with other leaders is when there's this difficult decision, either you have it consciously or subconsciously, it feels like I'm carrying this incredible weight. And when I decide to do something, it often is because I've chose a path. Path may be hard, the path may be difficult. But as you said, as you began, and I've often heard it characterized this way, choosing not to choose is still a choice. So when I keep carrying this huge weight, it's carrying a huge weight. When I've at least chosen to do something with it, had a trusted friend who recently told me about an experience in his own marriage that it was they were having some troubles and all of those things that happened during those times. But he said, when we finally chose to kind of go our separate ways, it was just a huge relief. And not a huge relief because I'm done with her, all of those negative things, because not at all. He's going through sadness and sorrow and all of those things you would imagine. But it felt like a huge relief because there was a path. The path would be hard. It would still be ripe with emotions, but there was a path. The not knowing, the lack of any kind of direction was more difficult than having a path.
Yeah. Yeah, you often hear this in business when I know an organization that said, we've tried community paramedic for a number of years now, and we're confident of it. We've done amazing things, but nobody wants to pay for it.
Right.
And therefore, we're going to just make a decision and stop doing this. We're going to put it to the side. And what happened for them was that as they did that, they thought, wow, we won't be sort of in vogue anymore. We won't be sort of like everybody else. But once they did that, it opened up a path for something else. And they were able to grow in another way. So there's making big decisions is important. So difficult decision. One last thing I'll say about this is there's a TED Talk by Ruth Chang, Chang, called How to Make Hard Choices. It's a wonderful TED Talk that can be, for 18 minutes, you can sit and listen to somebody talk about this very topic. So I just want to recommend that as we move on from this. So far, we've got our commitment to don't do the workarounds, get clear about our mission, invest in conversations, make a difficult decision. So we have two more. Aarron, what's your last one?
And my last one is to make a commitment to listen. And I realize on the surface that sounds so simple, but I think it's easy for leaders. It's certainly easy for me as a leader to do a lot of pontification, to tell lots of sermons. And you mentioned it earlier, the 75-25 rule. If I'm going to practice conversations, I'm going to make them sacred, and I'm going to reorganize and reorder my day and my priorities, it will be a waste of my time, and especially the time of the people that I want to have conversations with, if I don't spend any of the time listening. Because the last thing they need is to get more sermons from me. And so want to make a new or renewed commitment to listen.
And and talk a little bit. We often teach in the Leadership Academy, and many of our listeners have likely been to the Academy or are familiar with it, but we often talk in the Academy about listening being, at different levels, and that there is a way in which we approach listening. Most of us kind of like to frame ourselves as good listeners, but that may not be.
Yeah, we certainly talk about the listening but not hearing, and certainly don't want to practice that. So that's just going through the motions, practicing, the active listening skills that we saw in a TED Talk or took a seminar on. Certainly don't want to do that. But then we have listening and hearing, which I certainly think is important. So again, that goes back to the characteristics of conversations, which is an openness, a willingness to hear something new or different. And I would take it a step further to make sure that I use more than just these things when I'm listening. But then that third level that we think is so important is the listening, hearing, and bearing witness. That ability that I think will come with good listening in conversations to really hear what's underneath. Because often I think when a conversation begins, or we have a fixed amount of time for a conversation, or it's smacked in between other more perceptually important things, we just get what's on the surface. We get the emotional vomit that comes out, right? You pull into the crew quarters because you want to chat with the crew, and they just got done with the long distance BLS emergency code 3 transfer that had to go 15 minutes before shift change. So out it's going to come. Blah, 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 blah. And so, oh yeah, once again, it's the little thought bubble that's going above my head as the crew is talking. Oh yeah, once again, it's about transfers. They don't understand how they are important to our organization, how they bring 80% of our revenue. Well, that just has to get out, right? It has to, but let that come out and really hear it. And then to begin to ask some questions about what might be underneath. Why was this huge emotional response to the first transfer? I'm making this up. The first transfer they took in the day. Boy, the injury doesn't seem to match the response, right? Huge response to this one transfer. But I think when I really listen, I listen and hear, and I bear witness, I might get what's underneath. Maybe this is a recurring pattern. Maybe it's showing up as a feeling of abuse, of neglect, abuse by the hospital, neglect by their leaders. Maybe it's showing up as feeling not valued and appreciated. Maybe it's feeling like their company is heading in a direction that they didn't originally sign up for. Hey, we're going to turn into a transfer company that once in a while does 911. Imagine all that could be underneath of there. But I won't discover that. I would suggest when I simply listen. Oh, yep. Okay. Sounds frustrating. Wow. Boy. Gosh. And I lean forward. And I probably won't get that if I just listen and hear. Oh, I understand. You had a last minute transfer and you're really frustrated about it, versus the listening, hearing, and bearing witness. So I need to do that in conjunction with conversations, the reordering of priorities, making the commitment to having them happen. So listen, hear, and bear witness, or said maybe differently, or it's a little simplistic. Bearing witness means much more. Those that have been in the academy, I think, have experienced what true bearing witness is when we demonstrate counsel process. But I think a level of bearing witness is really hearing what's underneath. On the surface, I'm mad about the transfer. Underneath, it's about something much more.
You know what I love that you brought this up because it's so much even more and in deeper than the commitment to conversations. And I just want to share this with you, Aaron. I'm finding as I pay attention to this listening that it's easy to listen to people that I generally agree with, and that
Or you like.
I like, yeah. And it's very difficult for me to listen to people who I don't agree with. And I just tell a quick story. I live in Southern California. For many people who know me, know that I am lean toward kind of a hippie ideology, and you know, barber shops are not that important to me, and you know, typical liberal politics is my path, and I also hang around with a lot of law enforcement. I have a law enforcement friend from South Dakota, and he and I are diametrically opposed in our current political beliefs. And what I noticed was it was really hard for me to genuinely want to listen with this possibility that I might learn something or change my mind, and to listen as you were talking with my heart and to genuinely bear witness. But I recently had a chance to do that. I recently just said, you know what? His name's Matt, and I said I'm going to listen to Matt about his political perspective with empathy and with a way of trying to see if I can just for a moment put my feet in Matt's shoes. And it was changing. It was my how I saw Matt was a caricature, and why he was a pro-Trumpian, why he believed in many conservative positions and thoughts. I didn't understand until I genuinely and deeply listened to him. So I love that you brought this up. I would encourage the listening to be seen as an opportunity. If you
Yeah.
look at this listening as a chance.
And I think to just really model what you said, if I and others really want to get good at listening, I think we should make a concerted effort to listen to those that we don't like, or we don't or that we don't agree with. That's when the skill will really get tuned, because you'll know it. You'll know it in yourself, and you'll know it in the other person's response if you weren't really listening, if you weren't really being part of a conversation. We've all been in them. We've all had somebody not listen to us when we've talked. We've all had someone not be part of a conversation, but instead just lecture us. So we'll know it, right? We'll
Yep.
know it when we do it, and we'll know it when we see it in them. That's when I think we'll really hone the skill, is to be able to be kind but firm, gracious without being, just a pushover, and, all of those kinds of ways of really describing it. That's when the skill will really get tuned well.
Great. So one last one. We have commitment to not doing the workaround, commitment to your personal mission, commitment to conversations, commitment to really making the difficult decision, commitment to listening. One last one is a commitment to pay attention to the frame. To the frame, yeah. Like imagine a picture frame. You bet. So there's something in psychology called the framing effect. And you can Google framing effect and all of that. But framing effect is that how we think about things really impacts what we do with them, how we act from them. So the perfect example in Psychology 101 that we often talk about, framing effect shows up when you go into a store and you look at two different containers of yogurt. One says 20% fat, and the other one says 80% fat free. Or you may go into a car dealership where the car gives you the price, and the other one says the price, but it has it crossed out and it shows a discount. So when the frame is really important. And we all know that we can frame things as a challenge, or we can frame them as an opportunity. Same thing, it's just a different frame that we've put around it. So the reason I want you to think about that is that as we are in the midst of, I want to suggest a commitment to noticing the frame, is to notice the frame of how you as a leader are framing various things in your organization. So if we frame things from a negative connotation, that's what we're going to get from our people. If we frame it from a more positive standpoint, we'll get it. So let's put this in really context. So all of our organizations are facing challenges related to the ongoing pandemic and the demands that it's making on us, everything from vaccinating to transporting difficult patients. How we frame this experience is really important. So let me give you an example. We can frame this experience as something that just needs to be endured. Or we can also frame it as the ultimate test of our organization. This is our biggest challenge. And we may never face a challenge as big as this. This ongoing, enduring medical crisis may be one of the biggest challenges we ever face. And if we frame it in a way that it says, let's keep asking ourselves the question of how is this experience bringing out the best in us, we will begin to notice the best in us. And we will begin to start striving for that. Whereas if we frame it just as about endurance and not breaking down and not falling apart, we might just fulfill that of breaking down and falling apart. So pay attention to the frame, pay attention to how you're framing, and the frame is always most important when we're dealing with adversity.
Wow. Your commitment makes me think of a kind of a famous little story. And it's a story of a grandfather talking to his grandson. And we can all imagine this, right? So elderly grandfather talking to his, say, 6-year-old grandson. And of course, grandfathers are always imparting wisdom to their grandsons. And so grandfather looks down at his grandson and he says, "Grandson, did you know there are 2 wolves that live inside of you?" And he looks up. "There are 2 wolves in me?" Grandpa says, "Yes, there are." And they're fighting. Every day they're fighting. And one is trying to win over the other. And of course, the grandson looks up. His eyes are big. I mean, you just can't imagine these creatures inside of him fighting. And Grandpa says, "One is evil. It's anger. It's pride. It's prejudice. It's everything that's wrong in us and in the world." Oh. He says, "The other is everything that's good in the world. It's love, compassion, empathy, kindness, grace, everything that's kind and great in the world and in our relationship with others." Oh, he looks up at his grandpa and he says, "They're always fighting." And he says, the little boy says, "Grandpa, but which one's going to win?" And of course, Grandpa says those wonderful words that connect to this conversation about the frame. And he says, the wolf that wins is the one that you feed. So I hear you when you talk about the frames. I hear myself encouraging myself that says I can feed the negative frame. Oh, barely survived COVID. Beat us down. We almost went bankrupt. Oh, all of the negative. Or I can feed the frame that says, look at what we accomplished. Look at the incredible things together only we could have made happen.
Yeah.
But it's whichever frame I feed as a leader, personally and professionally.
You know, the whether your story is wonderful, and it is a wonderful way to summarize that, the which wolf do we feed story, and an amazing story, but this whole concept is huge. Somebody who's talked a lot about it is the economist, I'm sorry, the psychologist who won a Nobel Prize for economy, Daniel Kahneman. And his book, Thinking Slow and Fast, is, and the difference between thinking slow and fast is really this framing. And the whole book really is about how economics depends on how things are framed. So if economically we believe things are on an upward trajectory, we'll invest money. We will go out and buy things, and the opposite will happen based on framing. And within our leadership, how we ultimately frame stuff, I think, is an art that we have to develop within ourselves. It's not just about, well, I'm more of a cup half full or a cup half empty kind of guy. It is really about, because this connects to what you hear Aarron and I talking about storytelling. Because storytelling is really the art of framing applied. And if we begin to think about how things are framed, and that when we teach workforce stuff in the Leadership Academy, we say that people are interested in three things when they come to work, and that is respect, connection, and meaning. And the respect and the meaning are all related to framing stuff. So enough on that.
If I could offer one more book, and it I think is one of those time-tested works, and often, John, you talk about it, is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. I think, again, while not necessarily using those exact words of framing, it's really the concept that he is talking about and how it really shaped his life when he began to understand his empowerment of choosing the frames and in which frame, which wolf he was going to feed. But I was also wondering, John, if I might suggest, and you might be thinking similar, about how when we think about these commitments, they might actually turn into reality versus when we make the commitment to lose weight and exercise more and such after the New Year's, they never turn into anything. So I know for myself, what is going to be really important is, for me, the concept of the 10%, the small bites. So if I say to myself, starting Monday, I'm going to make sure that I have 80% of my day available to just go have conversations, I'm going to fail. This isn't going to happen. But what if I say to myself, today, I'm going to have one conversation. I'm going to make one opportunity happen to go and sit with someone and just have a conversation. I can do that. It's just one. I can make one thing happen today. I can be 10% better at it. And then maybe tomorrow or the following week or the following month, I want to try to have two of those conversations. But if I try to make it all happen at once, if I'm going to go from what I weigh today to half of that tomorrow, Not going to happen. I'm going to get frustrated, and I'm going to feed the frame that says, see, it's not possible. I'm too busy to make those things happen. Small bites, 10%.
Well, good. So just to summarize, our commitments to consider were the ones we suggested were no more workarounds, to get clear about your personal mission, commit to conversations, investing in conversations, make the hard decision, commit to more deep listening, and a commitment to really seeing the frame. So that's our suggestions. Pick what you want out there. But in closing, what I just simply want to say is we all hope for a better future in 2021. And the ticket to the future in your realm is leadership. Leadership in your own life, leadership in your family, leadership in your social world, leadership in your work world and in your professional life. And we want to encourage you. We're excited that you hang out with us and talk with us. And we're just looking forward to 2021. Any last comment, Aarron?
Just that I know we're all capable of more. And our leadership practice can be 10% better by simply making some commitments and taking some small bites out of them. All of the folks we've interacted with through our clients, through our Leadership Academy, have always amazed us with their capabilities, with their kindness, their thoughtfulness, and making a few commitments that we can take some small bites will make not only this 2021 a better year, it will make us better personally and professionally. And I know we can do it.
Great. Next time, we'll be talking about the most difficult conversation you'll ever have. And we'll unpack that for you. But we look forward to it, seeing you again and trying to make these available through YouTube. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.